Hello, brothers and sisters. This is Ann, and today is August 11th, 2021. A lot of people teach that the wedding supper of the Lamb will happen before the Great Tribulation. They teach that Christ is going to take the bride, whom they call the church, and they're going to go away for a 7-year marriage celebration in heaven while the rest of the world goes through great tribulation down here on earth. Brothers and sisters, this cannot be true because the bride and the groom will be on earth during the Great Tribulation. You see, they are the two witnesses, and they do not go to heaven until after they are killed and resurrected, and this happens before the seventh trumpet begins to sound. And you can find that in Revelation chapter 11. Now, the following bullet narrative that I've produced is how I believe some of the events are going to occur. Now, some of these events that I'm talking about include the wedding feast of the Lamb, the fall of Babylon, the second Exodus or fleeing into the wilderness, the mark of the beast, the death of the two witnesses, and the fact that Christ cannot reign as king until he is crowned king by his Father and given that power and authority. So let's get started. The wedding supper of the Lamb does not occur until after the fall of Babylon. And if you go to Revelation chapter 19, verse 2, and read that particular verse, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. You see, Christ cannot marry his bride until after he is crowned and given authority and power to reign over the earth. And he's given that by his Father. You can find that in Revelation chapter 11, verse 15 through 17. Revelation 19, as I said before, and that's in 6 and 9. Also, that's contained in Daniel chapter 7, verse 13 and 14. Christ is crowned by the Father, and he begins his reign after the seventh trumpet begins to sound. This is when the bride and the groom, remember, we read in Revelation chapter 11, verse 15, that is when the seventh trumpet begins to sound. And that's when the two witnesses have been killed, they have been resurrected, and they are lifted up to heaven. So that is exactly when he can actually start his reign, because that's what it says in that particular verse. Now, speaking of the mark of the beast. So bottom line on that, the church is not going to be in heaven. The church is not going to be in heaven while the two witnesses are down here on earth going through the tribulation. That's just not going to happen. Speaking in terms of the mark of the beast. Now, the mark of the beast is implemented after the fall of Babylon. If you go to Revelation verse 13, starting 11, it talks about, in that chapter, it talks about the two beasts, but Revelation 13, verse 11 talks about the second beast. The mark of the beast is implemented by the second beast. This second beast is called the two-horned beast. It says that it looks like a lamb, but it has a voice like a dragon. When the first beast, which is Babylon the Great, when it falls, then the second beast, that lamb-like beast, it's time to come into full power. This lamb-like beast is very devious. It is the one who will enforce the mark of the beast, and it causes many to be killed. I have warned of this beast before. It truly is a good imitator, because it's imitating itself to be like a lamb-like nation, but it's not. I've talked about this particular beast before, called it out, but I'm not going to get into details right now because of the fact that there's so much censoring. So when this first beast, it means Babylon the Great, falls, God will call his people to come out of Babylon. Come out of Babylon the Great. Now, this will be the call for God's people to flee to the wilderness. This will be the call when God is going to actually start the second Exodus. And we can find information about come out of her, my people, in Revelation chapter 14, verse 6 and 8, Revelation chapter 18, verse 2. See, I believe that when God gives the call to his people to flee Babylon, the mark of the beast, when God first give that call, and remember, an angel is going to come down and actually make that give that message. When God tells us it's time to flee Babylon, the mark of the beast will not have been implemented at that point. The mark of the beast will not have been implemented at that point. And the call is going to be given to us to flee Babylon. And if we flee Babylon, you won't have to take the mark of the beast, because God is going to provide a place in the wilderness where he's going to actually work with his people. Revelation 14 verse 8 talks about that. So by all means, when God gives this call for us to flee to the wilderness, for the second Exodus to begin, you need to be ready to go. Because if you're not ready to go, you're going to be forced with being left behind from the Exodus. And if you are, you're going to have to either take the mark of the beast, or you're going to have to die for your faith in Jesus. Again, Babylon the Great is not the beast that implements the mark of the beast. It is that little two-horned beast that you have to be watching out for. But you need to be ready to flee Babylon whenever that call is made. And again, that's the call. Some call it fleeing to the wilderness. Some call it the second Exodus. It doesn't matter. When God said it's time for you to go, you need to go. And the reason that you're going to have to flee Babylon is going to be because of the mark of the beast. So keep those tied together in your mind. The mark of the beast is going to be the reason that you want to flee to the wilderness for sure. So what do I want you to remember from this little short video? Well, I have 5 things that I want you to remember. 1, the wedding supper of the Lamb happens during the 7th trumpet. It does not happen before tribulation starts. You're not going to be swooped up to heaven as a church and sit there while the whole world goes through tribulation. That's just not going to happen. That is false teaching that is going to have a lot of people not prepared. Number 2, the V-jab is not the mark of the beast. The mark of the beast is coming, but that jab is not the mark of the beast. It is not something that you should take. You should not make any excuses for taking it, but it is not the mark of the beast. Now, if you do not take the call when God tells you it's time to flee to the wilderness, it's time for the second Exodus, it's time to get out of Babylon. If you do not take that call, you surely are going to be left behind, and you're either going to have to die for your faith or be lost by taking that mark of the beast, because it's surely coming. Let's see, did I cover everything? Okay. All right. Yes. The bride and the groom are the 2 witnesses, and they will be killed, be resurrected, and taken to heaven during the Great Tribulation. In fact, toward the very end of the Great Tribulation, right before the seventh trumpet sound, and this is when it's going to happen to them. So if they're here on earth, the bride and the groom, the two witnesses, surely the church is not going to be sitting up in heaven waiting on them to get there. That's just not going to happen. So because again, the bride and groom are Yahushua and the Holy Spirit. So that's basically all that I have for today. If you have any questions and you want me to clarify anything, please just send me a text or just leave a comment, and I'll be glad to do the best I can. And I would say shalom until the next time.